Hey everybody, it's your pal Mike Zombie, and this week we're going to talk about Night of the Living Dead 3D Reanimation from 2012. This is a brand new one, folks. I was worried when I got this copy that it was going to somehow take me to a weird, bastardized area of George Romero's work. It was going to be some derivative of one of the remakes of Night of the Living Dead. And I'm pleased to say, at least in that regard, it's not the case. This is a standalone movie that, to be honest, I don't know why they have the name. And I really wish films would divorce themselves completely from George Romero's work if it's not going to be either involved in his work or use the same characters or the same plot. Kind of bugs me. I was also a bit afraid that this movie was going to take place in 1968, but it doesn't. It's modern day. Okay, because this is a brand new movie, and I do mean brand new movie, I'm not going to ruin it and tell you the whole deal. I'm going to give you a little just flyby, enough to get you to see it. This movie takes place not in 1968, as the title might lead you to think, but actually in the Tovar Funeral Home, modern day. It's very clear to me that it was shot in Los Angeles, because I recognize some of these places, and there's California plates, but I'm not quite sure, to be honest, where they had it set. It stars Andrew Divoff as Gerald Tovar. Now, he's a funeral director at the Tovar family, I think Tovar and Son Funeral Home. And things are kind of crazy. And what I will say about this film, because it wasn't the greatest film, but it absolutely was watchable. It wasn't bad. What I liked most about this film, since I'm giving you the short version today, there must have been either a funeral director or an embalmer or somebody involved with this project that were able to direct them on what would really happen in a funeral home. Because, folks, some of you know, I used to work in a funeral home. I worked as a transport driver for the Orange County Coroner's Office here in Orange County, California. I also worked, I won't mention the name, I worked for a local mortuary. And I've been in, because of my first call driving experience working for a mortuary transportation company that no longer exists, I've been inside of every single mortuary in the Los Angeles area. I have, dropping bodies off, picking bodies up, transferring. So I can verify that the setting in this film, minus seeing like some of the embalming equipment that you would have seen, the things you're talking about are real. And for the most part, very accurate. And this, if you're ever wondering what it's like in a funeral home when you're not there getting a quote or setting up a pre-need package or something of that nature, this movie is spot on. It's a bunch of people sitting around, nicely dressed, but maybe nicely dated dressed. I mean, it's not the suit you would expect to see at a business meeting. It's the suit you would expect to see in a mortuary, which is what it really is. And they sit around and they're looking for stuff online. They're kind of hanging out. They're kind of very unenthused. That's really how it is. Unless you're part of a big chain, for example, down here, and I think I can say proper names as far, because this is going to be complimentary. Forest Lawn is big here in Los Angeles and Orange County. It is a chain of mortuaries, a large chain, and they own not just mortuaries, cemeteries. They have a program for apprentice embalmers. I mean, it's a pretty big business for these guys. But they're also the pros in the industry as far as the chain goes. You know, when you think of chain things, you maybe think of like fast food, which, you know, it's kind of like a shitty competition with kind of a shitty product. It's like, well, we're going to get the cheapest crappy hamburger. Well, there is something to be said for the skill and love for the craft that a family mortuary provides. Old school embalming. It's changed a lot over the years. But as far as the work that a chain does, Forest Lawn is very capable. They're very professional. I've got friends that still work for them. Don't have a bad thing to say about them, but they are a large chain. But to say that if you go to a place like this, like a big Forest Lawn, and you walk around inside, and if you go back, there's a lot of people doing a lot of jobs, and they're keeping very busy, and it's a very active kind of thing, because they may have a transfer of, the Orange County Forest Lawn, the one in Cypress, let's say, for example, they have 20 bodies coming in today, 15 bodies coming in today, because people look to the, phone book, not that people use that anymore, but they look online, they see Forest Lawn, they say, well, they're obviously a giant company, they're a leader in the industry, they're going to give me great service, so they probably call them first. So if you were to show up, it's a very busy, very active place. There's a lot of stuff to get done. You go to a smaller place like the place where I worked, where literally it was a company that was handed down from father to daughter. I was not an embalmer. I was a driver. I was an assistant. They have like the houseboy here who's always running around to wash the Cadillac and move the stuff and go get the body, bring the body back. That's what I did. And I've stood in and helped with embalmings, but I'm not an embalmer. I don't want to misspeak my credentials as far as that goes. No, I will say that the conversations going on between the embalmers, the apprentices, and the assistants, and the funeral director in this film, for the most part, is what you'd really hear. This is a small family-run business like the one I worked for. Don't get me wrong, as far as craziness and shit going on, but as far as staffing size, very similar. And what you see in this film, if you do watch this film, and I would say you should already, it's very, very honest as far as people hanging out. Oh, I'm doing this. I'm going to go order this, and I'm waiting for business to come in, and someone hits the door, and suddenly it's everybody stands up straight and says, "Hi, how are you? I'm so sorry your relative died. Come on in, we're going to take care." And then it's a very personal experience. But in the meantime, it's a bunch of just salespeople kind of hanging out with nothing to do. And it is a very somber place. So you're not running around going, woohoo, doing the Macarena. Not going to happen. So at the Tovar place, it's no different. Like I said, it revolves around Andrew Divoff, Gerald Tovar, who got the mortuary from his dad. And business has been a lot better. He's kind of quirky, though, because he's very protective. He's very odd in the way he deals with certain things. When he's talking to people, he's very normal, but he has a few quirks, like not letting people in the crematorium. There's a reason for that. And there's zombies around, but he's the only one who knows. Maybe he's being weird and protective because he's trying to keep a great big secret. The performances in this film, I liked them, because it's like these are people that I used to work with. And we have Gerald's brother, Harold, show up. And his brother, just so you know, is not in the family business. He's a veterinarian, but he's a new and up-and-coming actor, and I really like his work. His name is Jeffrey Combs. So, of course, I'm being silly. You wouldn't be listening to this podcast, I'm thinking, if you didn't know who Jeffrey Combs was. And if you don't, you really should look up his work. Now, this is not his best performance. He's got a neat little mustache in this. It kind of reminds me of Kip Dynamite, and I'm being serious about that. It's not his best performance, but I wasn't aware he was in this, so when he walked on screen, I was like, fucking A, this is great. This film also takes a little bit of time to do some fun political joking, makes it a little interesting. And there are a few characters in this that I just wasn't that into, but all in all, this was a decent zombie film. I've heard complaints from people about I don't know why I'm acting like I've got some insight. If you look on IMDb, some guy's pissing and moaning about the CGI. You know what? The CGI, I thought, was fine. It was very minimal. They had a lot of practical effects that looked pretty good. And this was apparently I don't have a 3D copy. If this is 3D, then it's probably going to look good. There were some shots that I thought, well, they did that because it's going to really take advantage of this being 3D, but they weren't shitty. They weren't like Jaws 3 where they're like, look, as we cruise around this bench in front of the water, let's get the corner of the bench in 3D. It wasn't that kind of filming, and I appreciate that because I've long been on the train of who gives a fuck about 3D. I'm pleased when it's done sensibly, reasonably. So, of course, it wouldn't be true to the name if there wasn't zombies. There's a zombie problem, and the brothers, Gerald and Harold, kind of have to come together and find some middle ground because sometimes brothers don't always get along. Sadly, that's all I'm going to give you on this film. On the Burdinsky scale of Jeffrey Combism, which is no fucking joke. I'm not even quite sure what I said, but you know what? If you want to hear it again, rewind. This movie's a borrow. You've seen Andrew Divoff in all kinds of stuff, and he's great in this as the quirky funeral director. He really is. And Jeffrey Combs, again, not his best performance, but he kept me hanging in there. I'm like, and folks, and also watch Reanimator. At least the first one. What the fuck is wrong with you? You communist? Watch it. Check out Night of the Living Dead 3D Reanimation. If you can get it in 3D, go ahead and check it out. The film doesn't really go anywhere to take super advantage of the 3D. There's no crazy epic shots. It's all kind of in the same little funeral home or at the Tovar house. It's worth a watch, especially because anything Jeffrey Combs is in is worth a fucking watch. And I don't give a shit what you say. It's true. Be good. Enjoy. See you next week.